temporarily close up. It's too long.
Okay, so what we can do is we can begin, as usual, with a bit of meditation just to settle our mind and to begin to reset a bit. So holding our back straight is a great first preparation. You don't have to sit with your back straight. You can lie down or walk or stand. But often, if we're sitting, there's a balance between keeping our back straight but relaxed. And those two, it's a simple instruction, straight but relaxed. But really, we can play with that for a long time to figure out what is really, what's too straight, what's too relaxed. We just feel our way through that over time. The balance always changes. And just begin by taking a deep breath in and out. And then another deep breath in and out, and just invite ourselves to relax a bit. We send ourselves the signal that we can relax. And then with our third breath, we just ask ourselves, what is important now? Our mind easily gets caught up in lots of stories, worries, imagination. And sometimes we lose track of what's actually happening right now in our body and mind. And so we start to take this time to become aware of that, reflect on what's happening inside. How does our body feel, for example? And as we start becoming aware of our body, perhaps the feeling of our breath stands out. It's an obvious rhythm. We can feel it in different places in different ways, but it can help us to bring our attention back to the body. And as we follow each breath in and out, our body expanding and contracting just a tiny bit, we just allow our attention to settle and relax. And if we feel tension in our body, we just allow that to relax. Our body itself can be an object of gratitude. We can recognize so many conditions enabled us to get to where we are today. Other people, food, good shelter, and our body is a reminder that we have benefited from the kindness of countless others. And we try to generate some feeling of warmth, just bringing to mind anyone or anything for which we're grateful. And just notice how this feels in our body, that feeling of gratitude. And then we can think by holding this feeling of gratitude and by increasing our mindfulness, the strength of our mind, our wisdom, and so forth, we can build the capacity to help others, build the capacity to repay their kindness, provide a wise, peaceful presence in the midst of chaos. And with this intention, we can open our eyes and rise from meditation. So sometime back, the topic came up. Where is this all going? Like, where? What's the ultimate goal of meditation practice? Something like that. And I kind of joked, oh, would you like me to talk about enlightenment at some point? But I thought I might as well give some explanation for what enlightenment means in the Buddhist context, at least, which is my training and background. But to help us to appreciate that it's something deeper than just a word, or something deeper than just a story. It's something quite profound that is accessible, and so that is accessible to all of us in a sense. The last week I'd talked about the practice of relying only on a happy mind. That how a happy mind is reliable and unhappy minds tend to be a bit shifty and untrustworthy. for our own benefit, we can appreciate the power of moving towards greater and greater states of happiness and peace. That's kind of what we want. We want to take a shortcut. We need internally through practices like meditation to find a shortcut to being happy that doesn't require everything in the universe to align exactly right, so that even if the world is not perfect around us, we can still be happy, we can still be at peace, we can still be contented. And learning how to, just take a shortcut, basically a direct route to happiness or inner peace by looking inside, inside our own mind and how that operates. Now, we can some of the signs of progress that our meditation practice is starting to sink in is that we get angry or upset for a shorter period of time. So let's say normally we would get upset for maybe a few hours. We're still kind of storming. Maybe we trim it down by a few minutes. At first, it's an imperceptible improvement, right? But gradually we go from being angry for 3 hours to being angry for just 1 hour, right? That's actually enormous progress. If we can build that level of internal composure. Eventually, maybe we get to the point where we're angry for only 5 minutes, and then it sort of washes away, right? There's a massive, massive transformation, really, and that's the power of familiarity. So the traditional word for meditation, at least in the Tibetan tradition, is gom, which means familiarization. Literally just means that, just means becoming familiar with some, familiarization. And the word itself, familiarization, it has a very similar feel to being at home with something. What is family, right? You're born into this world, and you show up, and there's a handful of other people in that household, and they're bigger than you are, right? And they all have their good qualities and their bad qualities and their quirks, and they're like this and that and so forth. But you kind of just think that's the way they are. And there's a level of acceptance, even if we don't like some aspects of our family, or they wouldn't be the people we chose to be around or whatever. But there's a level of acceptance, like this is us, we're family. We're and whereas if somebody comes from outside, we have a lot of judgments. Do I like this person? Do I not like that person? And so forth. And we build that sense of family, even if we're in a company or an organization. There can be some similar sense, like, okay, these are insiders versus outsiders, and there's a level of acceptance. So we're learning in meditation to become familiar or at home with peaceful states of mind. So that just becomes more comfortable. Like at first, a practice like breathing meditation may be a little bit alien, right? But gradually it becomes more and more familiar. We become more at home doing that, more relaxed doing that. It's not something strange, or a training like thinking about a difficult situation in a different way so that we don't become angry. At first, it's like unfamiliar. Well, of course I should be angry. Like, why wouldn't I be angry? And justifying the anger and holding on to it. But then you learn the practices about how to think about, what the other person is going through instead of just focusing on your own experience. And you learn new ways of dealing with that situation so that you don't remain with anger, simply because anger is not a pleasant mind to remain with. It's not a nice state to be living in. So why would you hold on to it, right? It's just, okay, you're angry. Let's not belabor it. Let's not dwell on that. Let's let it pass and make better decisions next time, whatever. So we're becoming more at home with these peaceful states of mind, and the unpeaceful states of mind are actually becoming a bit more unfamiliar, a bit more like strangers to us. So we're becoming at home in a state of peace, and we're becoming estranged from minds like anger, attachment, delusion, and so forth. But these disturbed states of mind have a tendency to keep coming back. They have a tendency to keep persisting, because in a sense we're human beings, right? And there's some natural human tendencies towards this and that. Eric had written a nice note in the Slack chat about how he was noticing himself becoming angry on his commute, his drive at work. And then his brow would furrow and he'd get very intense. But he realized after some time that some of it was just he couldn't see very well. And so when he got glasses, his brow unfurrowed, he relaxed, and he's like, oh, it's not that bad, actually. And then we have this funny interplay between these very human things, like this is just how the body works, right? And the interplay between our body and our emotions and so forth. And so even if you have engaged in a long meditation retreat and you remain deeply peaceful for a long period of time, there's this tendency for these disturbed minds to keep coming back, right? This like they come, and that can be disheartening, right? There can be some sense like, am I ever going to make progress? You know, I was doing so well there for a while, and now my mind's disturbed again. And so, but there's something interesting that happens that shifts things to the next level. So there's a practice of meditation which is just simply getting familiar with peaceful states of mind. But then there's a practice which is unlocking a deeper level of wisdom, a deeper level of understanding about really what's going on. And this is where you get into, and this is the gateway to this deeper level of insight is this very simple, humble practice of mindfulness. The simple, humble practice of mindfulness simply means becoming aware of what's actually going on. And I like to, I like making, I make this parallel a lot. I'll make it again here. The difference between our conscious sense of self and what's actually happening in the body is a little bit like the perspective of an executive in a company, and then what's actually happening on a day-to-day basis in that company, right? There can be a bit of a disconnect there. Our sense of self is like our executive function. At some point, like in a company, you need an executive finally to just make a decision when a company can only do one from 5 different possible options. You need someone to just say, this is the one we're going to do. It may not be perfect, but we're going to do it. And somebody breaks the tie. Somebody says, this is where we're going. Somebody makes a decision and causes everybody to take action. And that's literally the meaning of executive. You execute an action. You perform an action. And that's exactly what our sense of self is. Our self is, you know, at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to face the consequences. But just like an executive in a company may not be very much in touch with the reality of what's possible and what's actually happening, we may not be very much in touch with the reality of what's happening in our mind and our body. And so a friend of mine recently described that her husband is the general manager of his organization. But his organization is very good at what's called succession planning, preparing for what will happen when he is no longer with the company. And so periodically, he's forced to take like 6 weeks off of work. Wouldn't you like to be forced to take 6 weeks off of work? But the idea, but the idea is, see what happens when he's not there. Right? See what happens when this person's not there, and see how the organization functions, and see how the organization can adapt, and see what problems arise, and make sure that the organization can surface those problems early, so they can deal with those. So, in a sense, what happens when the executive or the leader just disappears for a little while? You're faced with the reality of what's actually going on in the organization, what habits the organization has, what are the real tendencies that are strong or weak, and where things go naturally. There's a sense with mindfulness meditation that what we're doing is we're actually putting our executive sense of self on sabbatical. We're basically saying, okay, stop telling the story about who you are and who you think you are, and just look at what's actually going on. And there's a practice. So one of the teachers that I learned from a lot, he does from time to time, not all the time, but from time to time, he does practices like aimless wandering. Now, that is arguably the most un-American practice ever, right? Because Americans are supposed to be busy and doing stuff and, productivity and right. But aimless wandering, where you just try to not have any conscious intention, but just see what the body does, right? Just see what the body, like if you just let it walk and do this. He does practices like doodling, just drawing on a piece of paper and with no conscious intention, but just seeing what is coming out from the mind. And when we're doing breathing meditation, it's actually a little bit similar to this, that we're not trying to consciously control, but we're just becoming aware with curiosity and kindness of what's actually happening inside the body and inside the mind, without a sense of conscious intention there, just watching, looking at what's the natural intention that's unfolding from the body. And needless to say, you can imagine this general manager when he goes on sabbatical for 6 weeks, you discover there's a very different organization without them, right? And it's not that their presence was bad or good or indispensable, but it's just like you learn stuff, right? You're learning. You're understanding what the organization's really, what the natural, where it tends to go. It's like if you take very, very briefly, take your hands off the wheel in your car and you see your car drifts left, drifts right a little bit. You see, maybe your wheels are a bit out of alignment. The fundamental state of our mind, the traditional Sanskrit word to describe the fundamental state of our mind is called dukkha, which literally means bad hub or bad wheel hub. It means basically like a wheel that's out of alignment. So if you've got a wheel on a cart and it's out of alignment, sort of like bumping, that there's a kind of suffering. Dukkha is translated normally to mean suffering. It literally means like sort of bad misalignment, unskillfulness. There's some imbalance. And the opposite of that is called sukha, alignment. Literally is translated as bliss. So moving from suffering to bliss. So there's a level at which our alignment, our mental skillfulness, our mental alignment with living in this world, we're a bit out of alignment. We're a bit off. And if we stop consciously controlling things and just watch the body, send our self on sabbatical for a little bit and just try to become aware of what's happening, we might notice we have these little unconscious habits. I was lying in bed last night and just thought, okay, meditate, become mindful. And I just noticed my feet were twitching. My feet were kind of like rubbing each other. Just this sort of unconscious little, is insignificant. But I'm like, what is that? Like, is there some discomfort going on in my mind, my body? What's going on? And so you begin to notice things that you didn't notice before, like my shoulders are tense. Why is that? Like my chest is a bit tense. Why is that? I feel a little bit uncomfortable, right? Why is that? What's going on, right? And you begin to notice things that you hadn't seen before. And that literally is the meaning of mindfulness. It's just getting a little bit of a gap between this normal self and what's going on in the body. And that can teach us a lot. But that alone is powerful, right? That alone is a foundation. So to show you what is the extreme opposite, sometimes it helps to understand the opposite of things. What is the extreme opposite of mindfulness? The extreme opposite of mindfulness is having no idea what you're doing, but also having no idea whether what you're doing is right or wrong, or having no idea what the impact of your behavior is on others. There's a tendency for us to always think we are right and we are good. That's just natural tendency for us to think whatever we think is right must be right. The way we see things must be the truth. The way what we want must be good. What we do must be good. It's actually very awkward, very difficult for us to acknowledge, very uncomfortable for us to acknowledge if we did something wrong, right? Because it forces, there's this, what, the term cognitive dissonance. I'm a good person. And yet, if I look at that, I think I just lied. Good people don't lie. Oh no, what's going on? Am I a bad person? And there's some tension. There's some cognitive dissonance. There's the person we want to be, and then there's the person that we think we're acting like. And that makes us very uncomfortable. And so what's our mind do? We know an unhappy mind, an uncomfortable mind is not reliable, right? Our mind sort of tries to weasel out of it. It's like, well, there was a good reason why I lied, because I'm actually a good person. And you can justify anything. You can rationalize anything. You can rationalize murder. You can rationalize exploitation. So a lack of mindfulness, a lack of honestly recognizing what's going on and honestly recognizing our faults and so forth, not being obsessed with our faults, but just mindfulness. Lack of mindfulness can open the door to endless negative behavior, endless suffering, endless self-destructive behavior, endless, problems. But I mentioned that there's something profound that's opened up with this mindfulness, which is the separation or the gap between the sense of self, the story of the self that we tell ourselves, and the reality of what's going on. And there's a sense in which the reality of what's going on is always present, regardless of who we think we are or what we think is going on. There's some underlying reality. And the reality is exposed when we drop this sense of self, this sense of who we think we are. And that coming to recognize that the person we think we are is not the truth is a type of wisdom, right? There's a type of wisdom, profound wisdom that unlocks a door to liberation and enlightenment. And although those are lofty terms, right? We're literally just saying the self that we think we are is trapping us, right? Our story of who we think we are is trapping us, right? There is some, and we want to liberate ourselves from this bad, misaligned wheel that is our normal mode of being. And so when you recognize that the self that we normally think, the self that we normally see doesn't exist, the self that we normally think we are, that self is just a fabrication. When you begin to recognize this, there is a profound type of freedom that arises, a deeper freedom, so that even if in your mind, your peaceful mind is disturbed by some jealousy or some anger or some of these disturbing states of mind arise, on one level, that's not you, right? On one level, it's just something that you can be aware of. So in a sense, you are free from those disturbing minds. They're present in the mind. They're still manifesting, but they're not you. There's something that's going on in the mind. There's something that you're aware of. And so that's, it may seem subtle, but that subtle shift is the doorway to what's known as ultimate peace, an ultimate state of peace that transcends even our temporary states of mind. So anyway, just to introduce that subject a bit. And why don't we just bring this to some conclusion with some brief meditation, just to let that sink in a little bit. So with this final meditation, what we can do is just begin to appreciate some of the profound power of mindfulness alone, how it is a foundation. This simple awareness of what's going on inside is a foundation for many, many higher levels of realization and attainment. We take a deep breath in and out, just returning to awareness of our breath. We may have forgotten about it during this time. We can think we're normally so busy with our sense of self, this sense of I, doing, doing, doing. But sometimes critically important to check what's actually happening. If that sense of I disappears for a little bit, if we look at what's going on directly in our body and mind, what's actually happening? Strengthening our mindfulness will help us to become more familiar with, more at home with peaceful states of mind. Help us to remain in states of peace for longer and longer. But it also can help us to create a separation between this sense of self, to see that the sense of self is just a tool, just a convenience. It doesn't need to be trapped. And then we can conclude with the dedication, just thinking, even through this brief period of time, we've strengthened our peace of mind, our enthusiasm and openness for these practices, our wisdom, our determination. So building these mental pathways, these mental habits, is like sowing the seeds for beneficial results for ourselves and others in the future. And just imagine briefly, what are the best results that could unfold from these habits we're building together? open our eyes and rise from our meditation.